My name is Judith Wolff. I'm a professor of philosophical theology here at St. Mary's at the School of Divinity in the University of St. Andrews. And I'm standing here on behalf of our whole team, especially my co-organizers, Eric Priest here and Andrew Torrance there, to welcome you very warmly to the first James Gregory lecture of this academic year. The James Gregory lectures were founded almost 10 years ago, perhaps even just over 10 years ago, and have established themselves as one of the longest running and certainly one of the most prestigious lecture series for both public and university in the world on science and religion. They were founded by Eric here and by Alan Torrance to help us to move beyond the conflict paradigm in the dialogue or in the discussions of the respective roles of religion and of science, both in the university and in society. And they've attracted some of the most prominent names in the field over the course of their 10 years and continue to do so today. They were designed to do this in two ways. One, to report to the public the advances already made in these questions, particularly the advances already made in moving beyond seeing religion and science simply as opposed, and also to encourage new research in moving beyond that conflict paradigm. And so very often we have had speakers come here to speak as part of the dissemination of research that they are currently embarked on doing or have just concluded. And that goes for our speaker today as well. It's a tremendous pleasure to welcome Dr. Anne Pessi to us here. She is an embodiment of the virtues and the vision of the James Gregory lectures in that she is both a scientist, a sociologist, and a theologian, and is currently professor at the University of Helsinki. She's been a visiting professor and researcher at a whole number of universities, including Boston, Heidelberg, Georgetown, Lancaster, UC Irvine, and most recently Stanford. And she's led a number of large research projects, particularly on the question of altruism, of volunteering, and of compassion in society. Most recently, the one entitled Cooperation in Care, funded by the Academy of Finland, and one called Co-Passion, the Revolutionary Power of Compassion. And we look forward to hearing some of the fruits of those in just a few minutes. Above all, Anne personifies the vision of the James Gregory lectures in being somebody whose research not only is about, but really seeks to further the revolutionary power of compassion in society. And so we really look forward to learning from you today how to become answers to the living question, can compassion transform society? Welcome. I will sit you on.
Thank you so very much. It's hard to recognize oneself out of such beautiful words, but thank you. I am indeed very humbled and very happy to be here today with you. And the most central word that kept on rotating in my head when I was planning this lecture is here. I am so very grateful, Eric, and I'm so very grateful, Andrew and Judith, and also the Templeton Foundation and the University of St. Andrews for allowing me to come. Thank you. And where do I come from today is here. It's a beautiful picture, I think, of Helsinki, and one of our 4 campuses of University of Helsinki is right there in the middle. And if you ever come to Helsinki, please contact me it is part of my very last slide, my contact information, so I would love to host you there. And just a few words about the university. It's quite a large one. University of Helsinki, we have almost 8,000 employees and around 3,200 students. And it was founded in 1640, so in comparison to the University of St. Andrews, it's a young one. It's a young university from the 17th century. And it was actually founded by a 13-year-old girl. The world learned to know her as Christina, the Queen of Sweden. And just to show you one picture, I love illustrations, so we have lots of old, beautiful buildings, but this is our magnificent student library that was just completed 1 or 2 years ago from outside and from inside. So please, come and visit. It has already received some architecture awards. And the core question for us all today is indeed, can compassion transform the society? And in order to answer that question, we need to begin with kind of definition of society. And here my understanding resembles what could be called in sociology systemic intelligence approach. And that means that one of these two is always part of the other. So society always consists and is made up of people, of individuals with their dreams and their pains and their joys and their hopes. And this sometimes tends to get lost in political debates. And I think the role of religious organizations is really crucial here to remind us of the individual perspective, the delicate perspective of individuals. And the other side of the coin is that individuals should remember that they are always part of something bigger and larger than their close circles. And do our citizens feel that they are part of something bigger called Society of Scotland, Society of Finland? And do they feel the sense of togetherness and the sense of cohesion, particularly, for instance, the young people, the elderly people, the marginalized people? We should promote, and again I'm referring to the religious organizations doing such important work in making people feel that they are part of something bigger than themselves. And then we have organizations, communities, associations, and definitely the role of religious organizations here to build bridges not only from individuals to individuals, but from individuals towards the society and the kind of sense of society, I would say. So it's indeed called systemic intelligence approach to remember that one is always part of the other. And thus, the possible transformative power of compassion. If compassion is a transformative power, it has to be able to transform individuals. It has to be able to transform organizations. It has to be able to then transform entire societies. And this threefold skeleton is the structure of my talk today. We'll visit each of these three perspectives. And let us start with the first one, individuals. And I would like to start with you with a little question. And it is a question that I would like to ask you to ponder in solitude, in best of company, with yourself, in silence, for a few moments. Think about a moment, a concrete instance perhaps, when you last time had this sense that I matter. When you had the sense that your life is deeply meaningful, a sense of meaningfulness. Take a moment. It's beautiful to see that many of you spontaneously start to smile. It's a beautiful question. And most of my studies are indeed empirical studies, and as a scholar, my hypothesis now is that most of you are right now thinking about your loved ones, your children, your spouse, your friends. And when we look at wide international studies, my group also has conducted empirical exploration on these issues. And when we look at these studies all over the world, there are two cores of this sense of meaningfulness. And the first one does not come as a surprise. You and others. Most likely you were indeed thinking about someone close to you. But the second one is something that we tend to lose sight of. Most of the past 3 years I've been working together with corporations, businesses, large ones, but also different workplaces of different kinds, from the public sector, from art foundations, and so forth. And particularly the corporations in the business sector, they often tend to forget that according to studies, the second core, and it's not actually second, it's just as powerful. One of the cores of sense of meaning is you for others. And this relates and resonates to the power of religious organizations, I believe, in particular. So people want to be part of something bigger, something that they value, kind of self-transcending perspective. And are we able to give them in our societies opportunities to do that? And how then in concrete? And now I would like to invite you to a little exercise. We will pair up. So please turn to your neighbor. We need pairs, and if there is somewhere we have a beautiful triangle, that's fine. Then we'll have our empirical scholar absorbing this little exercise, but preferably pairs, and then we have A and B. So decide which of you is A and which of you is B. Okay. Excellent. This looks good. This looks good. And now the next slide is the directions for all of you who are A's, A persons. So those of you who are B's, please close your eyes, take a tiny nap, just close your eyes, take a moment. And A's, this slide is for you. Please read it. We got it all? Mm-hmm. Good. Now open your eyes, B's and A's. It is your turn to take a little nap. And B's, the next slide is for you and for you only. We got it? Good, excellent. And now this one is for all of you. You have a minute as a pair. Follow the guidelines that you were just given. 1 minute. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And now my question to you all is, how did it feel? But before I let you answer, I will tell you the idea behind this exercise. The idea was that you A people were asked to tell something that you are currently very excited about, something that really makes you happy and excited, either at work or at home. The B persons, you were advised like this. Whatever happens next, remain stone-faced. No smiles, no nodding, no nothing. Excellent. It's good to see that it kind of you would like to talk about it, and that's beautiful. Who would like to share? I would love to hear a few thoughts. How did it feel?
Unnatural.
Unnatural. Congratulations to you and to your friends. May I ask, how did you, as her pair, how did you feel? Just weird. That kind of really well, I think, summarizes it. Would somebody else like to share? Separate. Sorry? Separate. That's a very good word to describe it. Separate. Were you A or B? The person telling the story. Yeah. May I ask you, as her pair, how did you feel? She felt separate.
I couldn't have any emotion about what she was saying, so flat.
Flat. Very good. I think those concepts really kind of epitomize the sense of the exercise. I also saw, thank you, I also saw a hand somewhere there, please.
I was a B and I felt hostile.
Hostile. And here actually it's a crucial part of my talk is here. Thank you and please forgive me. It's a painful exercise, but it's also my core message, and I bet that you won't forget it after this. That's also a strong and powerful word. Very, very, very much so. Would you like to take a guess? I've also studied the reactions to this exercise, and would you take a guess? Is it more painful to the person telling it or to the person listening? That's it. Of course, it's frustrating, it's painful for the person telling the story, but it indeed seems that it's even harder for the B person there listening. I was just last week educating some teachers, and I had this exercise for them. I don't do it very often because it is a sensitive, painful exercise. But I did it with these teachers, and they were actually, I later on knew and learned that there were quite a few who had done it before my teammate had been there. But they just said that it was just as powerful, if not more. They knew that the other person was forced not to react, but the same bodily reactions they could sense in themselves. So it is painful, and it really conveys, I hope, the message that we are, as species, compassionate by nature. And this again underlines the core message of world religions, that they are really onto something, really, really deeply so. We are compassionate by nature, and I bet that many of you who were bee persons, you had to kind of spend energy so that your body wouldn't move, trying to stay still. So it's our body, compassion is very embodied, and our bodies tend to react. Also, of course, it's a dramatic exercise, but these things happen in workplaces, which is the context that I have been exploring for the past 3 years. It's part of the everyday that there's a boss who kind of listens, but really doesn't listen. And also we have recent literature from communication studies that illustrate that if there's a mobile phone on the table, even though it would be kind of upside down, that I can see, that nobody can see what's in the phone, it still affects the micro movements of people's eyes. So that is something, and again, something that also religious institutions can teach us even more, to be present, to encounter one another. It's extremely powerful. I will tell you later why and how it is so powerful. But indeed, thank you and sorry. Here we have indeed the message that we are compassionate by nature, and this can be also seen in Charles Darwin's writings concerning, for instance, elephants as well as monkeys and human beings. So we are not only compassionate by nature, but it is a necessity. It is something, it's inevitable that it will come up if groups function well together, and of course a necessity as well. And what then is compassion exactly about, and how does it differ from empathy, for instance? Here is one definition coming from Jane Dutton. Also, we have defined it on the similar lines. So it's an interpersonal process involving the noticing, feeling, acting, and the sense-making that alleviate the suffering of another person. And when we look at also the Templeton Foundation or any religious organizations, so they are about virtues, and they want to promote virtues. So we are really, when we talk about compassion, I think we are in the sense, in the heart of virtues indeed. So visually, we can describe it like this. So we have the first step, do we notice? And according to stress studies, if we are really stressed and overwhelmed by our emails and inboxes and whatever, this is already cut away from us. We do not notice. We do not notice the silent signals of my husband or my colleague. I do not notice if they are particularly tired or particularly quiet, if I am just like, wow, focusing on my own stuff. Also, this noticing part reminds us of the fact that we need to be able to share. If I never share anything of my pain, I can't expect, for instance, my boss to be very compassionate to me. I need to be able to share. And we need institutions and organizations that have the culture of sharing. Do our bosses, for instance, our managers in workplaces, do they create the culture that it's okay to say that I'm really tired today? And then, after noticing, it is about the motivation. Some kind of feeling should arouse in us. It could be sympathy, it could be empathy. Empathy, an excellent phenomenon, something very needed, something very crucial, but still, it is a feeling. If I fall down now, and you have a deepest empathy for me, that's beautiful, but also it doesn't help me if you do nothing. So we also need the actions. We need to be ready to do something. So this is the core of compassion, and then of course the sense-making, the processes. And again here I want to remind you of the role of, for instance, religious organizations. They teach us how to read human beings. They teach us to be alert to the pain of other people. And now another little assignment in solitude. Think about for a few seconds a moment of sharing something positive. And now I'm not talking about the A and B exercise, but before today's lecture, yesterday, last week, something nice happened to you and you told it to someone. No matter how trivial. And it's an intimate question. I won't be asking this from anybody, but take a moment. Because now, the moment that you are thinking about is what I would call, and this is a new concept that we have launched in my research team, what we would call co-passion. In Finnish, it rhymes really well. It's myötätunto and myötäinto. So co-passion, myötäinto also a new word that we kind of just made up. But co-passion is about noticing the joy, the excitement of another person. How does it make me feel if a colleague gets a huge grant that I didn't? Well, I will have mixed feelings. I would have wanted to get the grant. Human beings, we are always full of different kinds of emotions every single second. But I hope and I believe that I would also be genuinely happy with her and for her. And do we have in our organizations, in our workplaces, do we have a culture of being happy for someone? At our theological faculty, there was a new professor who came and she got her like 350th publication and she brought some cake or something to the faculty coffee room. And then there was a professor who was just like not smiling, kind of this way and saying, we don't do this. And and coming from an elderly professor, it really kills the spirit. She just wanted to have cake with everybody because she did well and she had succeeded. So I definitely think that we should also celebrate each and every one of us and should be allowed and should have a permission to share also of the positive of each and every one of us. And then in an ideal life, in our organizations, in our congregations, in our universities, in our workplaces, we would have a cycle and a synergy of these two. And it might now look that this co-passion, the sharing of the positive, it's like a jolly, happy little sister concept of compassion, but it's actually not the case. I would argue that that is exactly kind of the cornerstone. If in the everyday we are able to share the positive, then when the need comes, and when the pain comes, we will also be able to be compassionate. And it is also a societal issue. Do we have in our societies this spirit that this is not a zero-sum game? Your benefits are not taken from me, and your good fortune is not away from me. So are our societies, are they like battlefields? Or are they do the people and do the citizens have the feeling that we are in this together, in solidarity? And what can we do? What can also religious organizations do to promote the sense of togetherness? That we will either rise or fall at the end together. So we need not only compassion, but a co-passion for that as well. And this is a question that I often am posed by journalists. They want to know that, okay, people get happy feelings out of volunteering, but aren't people deep down, egoists and evil? And there seems to be this very prominent view of human beings that in our deepest sense, we are not compassionate, and that is simply wrong. So, of course, the power of negative, the power of evil, one could say, it is strong. For instance, studies on human memory illustrate that we remember negative instances 3 times longer and 3 times stronger than the positive. It has its roots. It makes sense concerning or looking at it from a kind of evolutionary perspective, that we need to be alert. But we really need to practice to tune ourselves to the positive. If I, as a professor, want my doctoral student to leave my office feeling empowered, there should be 3 to 1 ratio of negative versus positive in my feedback. And that definitely is not the Finnish culture, definitely not in the universities. And if I want to let her leave in a positive spirit, it should not only be 3 to 1, that would be the neutral, 4 to 1. So that is something that we should pay attention to. And I would describe human beings as compassionate beasts. We really have the ability to be both beasts and compassionate. And these are the pillars of universal morality. In studies by, for instance, Jonathan Haidt, there are altogether 5 pillars of universal morality, these 2 being 2 central ones. So it means that as long as I am treated fairly, the compassion side of me is and will be active. If I'm treated unfairly, it's kind of natural, sometimes even ethical, that the beast side comes out. For instance, if my children are threatened, I will definitely not be just compassionate. And then if I am not treated empathetically, and if I am not treated compassionately, it is very hard to then be compassionate. And this, of course, relates to the societal issues, and again, the role of religious organizations. If we have the marginalized people, like in Finland, we have worrying statistics that the marginalization tends to already start to run in the family. It didn't used to be the case due to the public beautiful welfare system, but it is the case today. So if people have this sense of being outside the core of society, we can't really ask them to be extremely voluntary activists and whatever. We first need to make them feel safe and valued and part of the joint story. And here I want to show you a video. It is from a TED talk by Frans de Waal. He's a wonderful evolutionary biologist who has spent his career very successfully studying, for instance, capuchin monkeys. And his main argument is that not only the monkeys, but human beings are by nature compassionate as a species. Now, this is from a session together with researchers. There are 2 monkeys, one on the left side, one on the right side, and the monkeys give little rocks to the researcher, who then gives them, as a reward, a piece of cucumber. And they have been playing it already for a little while, and this is 1 minute from the middle part of the experiment, and you can see that the right-hand side monkey's reward is changed from cucumber to a grape. And definitely grape is better, it's sweeter, it's more delicious, and let's see what happens.
So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. That's what she does.
Crepe. And she was happy with the cucumber just a few seconds ago. Poor her. And now it's interesting what he or she does. He tests that this is really a rock. I'm doing the right thing. I'm playing by the rules. And still it is the cucumber. And his books are wonderful, and he's a very ethical researcher, so I can assure you that the monkey did get his crepe, or her crepe. But this really shows that people need to be treated fairly, and the message of fairness, and the political message as well, and the fact that congregations are loud in their societal and social message, I hope in all societies, of course, not everywhere. The fairness needs to be. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about it loudly. And then we have a lot of studies from evolutionary biology. Let's say, for instance, the chocolate and brain. When people are able to give money to a charity that they find meaningful, the sense of meaning, which was the concept where we started from, people's brains are activated in a similar way as if they were eating chocolate. The physical pleasure areas of our brain are activated. So compassion is very holistic. It is very embodied in us. And also there's an interesting study. It included a few cultures from different parts of the world, and they tested whether people can recognize from facial expressions compassion. And compassion, it's so universal, but it's actually quite tricky to recognize from facial expressions. I would think that there's some positive emotion, but what is it particularly and specifically would be hard. But compassion is more easily recognized, eyes folded, by touch in different cultures. It's very embodied and definitely says something and says very much about the holisticness and our nature. And it's kind of it's tricky business in talking about promoting compassion. There are some studies illustrating, quite many studies actually, on young children and compassion, and babies already in the age or at the stage when they are able to control their hand movements, a few months of age, they tend to be compassionate, so they would, if a stranger would be dropping something, the baby would try to show the direction, like there it is. But this study was done by, or together with 18 months old little toddlers, and they help spontaneously. For instance, the 18-month-old, they prefer to give candies to a puppet than receive candies from the same puppet. But these 18 months old, who spontaneously were helping a stranger, they were started to be rewarded with a little gift for their compassionate actions. And what happened? What happened is that their spontaneous acts of helping, their spontaneous acts of compassion dropped dramatically. That's tricky. And actually there was even a difference in verbal feedback, but that was luckily not statistically significant. So we can leave that now aside. But the fact is that, to me, it sounds like already the babies, the toddlers, they want to be seen as helping others out of free will. And if you bring their little logic of gifts, it kind of breaks the spell. You bring the monetary logic into the picture. So we are compassionate by nature, and we want to be acknowledged that we are. People don't want to be seen as helping others because there might be a reward coming. Here I have concluded on the transformative power of compassion. What does it do according to studies? What does compassion do for individuals? To individuals. Some studies coming from my group, many studies coming from recent studies from elsewhere as well. And here we are talking about particularly people as agents, as kind of givers of compassion, more than receivers. First of all, happiness. It's not really surprising, but people who help others, they tend to be happier. And it's a positive cycle then, because happier people then are more inclined to help. Also, what might not be so surprising is that individuals' social networks are boosted. Those people who help more are more respected and more positively seen by their peers, for instance, amongst high school students as well. But then, this is quite interesting, creativity and cognitive skills. So a warm encounter with a stranger promotes success in mathematics tasks. If people are asked to do a little assignments, maths assignments in a laboratory setting. If you do encounter strangers on a street with a little smile, just these tiny everyday positive encounters, you do become more clever, and the other person as well. It's amazing, but that's the way it is. And also, a very recent study illustrated that there's less cognitive decline with aging when we look at the people who have active networks of compassionate connections. And positivity resonance in micro moments, that concept comes from Barbara Fredrickson. She has studied these micro moments of love. She actually calls them micro moments of love. And this positivity resonance refers exactly to these micro moments of, let's say, meeting a stranger tomorrow in the streets of St. Andrews. Just a tiny moment of smiling, perhaps just eye contact. You might not even register consciously what happened there. But your brain reacts. There happens reaction in your body that is biochemical, and Barbara Fredrickson, has been able to illustrate the power of that reaction for or as a health booster. And your reaction also triggers similar kind of reaction in the brain of the other person. So the reaction not only boosts our cognitive skills, these warm, small, tiny encounters with strangers, but also our health. And then pleasure and joy, all kind of helping behavior boosts our dopamine levels, our endorphin levels, and the giving money we already talked about. Also, health and life expectancy. There's an interesting study on Catholic nuns and their diaries where we could see, I didn't do it myself, it's a wonderful study, decades over decades they studied these diaries of nuns and could see that those nuns who were the most compassionate, they were the ones who lived the longest and lived the healthiest. And one reason behind this is the vagus nerve, somewhere here. I know that there are doctors in the audience, you would be able to explain this better, but vagus nerve is activated by helping behavior, isn't it, John? John is the one, John Gillies, who built the bridges from Helsinki University to here, so thank you, John. Vagus nerve, and vagus nerve is the one regulating our heartbeat, regulating the inflammatory levels in our body, so quite an important nerve. Also, compassion, helping behavior, helping others, it buffers against pain. And then, this slide slipped my mind. I just collected here some illustrations of the power if your physician, if your doctor is more compassionate. What do we know from international research? The people whose doctor was experienced as more compassionate, they have better resistance to infectious disease, shorter colds, also among the patients with diabetic, more stable serum levels, people tend to follow the treatment plans better. All of this explained by the fact that nothing else is different except the fact that their doctor was experienced as deeply, or at least more, than the average compassionate. And then the balance here, the last item, that comes from a recent Finnish-Dutch study where we studied recovery from work. Really the quality of sleep, everything that happens, the physiological reactions in our body during our private hours. And what explains, for instance, the quality of sleep in the most powerful manner is exactly the collegial support between colleagues during the office hours. So you will sleep better if we are more compassionate to each other in our working communities. And here, just kind of to conclude the previous table, we are talking about a social cure, I would say. The magnitude of the effects of social compassionate connectedness on, for instance, mortality is comparable to quitting smoking, exceeds that for obesity, high blood pressure, and physical inactivity. These are findings concluded in a few meta-studies, review studies, and huge data, for instance, this one by Hausmann and others. So, compassion and compassion. Individual level, we are still talking about, can we do something about this? I sometimes encounter these viewpoints like, well, I'm not just very helpful, this is the way I am, he or she might do better in this. But that's not the way to think. It has been proven by many studies that we can do something about these things. We can learn, we can train, and how? I will show you a little bit more slightly later, but I just want to emphasize the fact that compassion, of course, just like empathy, it is always very biased. We tend to help the people who are closest to us more than we help people far, far away. And again, I want to underline the role of religious organizations because they are the ones, they are central agents in switching our mindset and reminding us of the fact that there are people suffering far, far away from here. Compassion is always biased, but it's actually rather easily manipulated. There's, for instance, an Israeli study among radiologists. So these doctors who never see the patient, they never have the person-to-person encounter with the patient, and they just analyze the x-rays and write their reports or the statements. And what happened when they showed a picture of the patient to the radiologist? Just a picture, just quickly, the picture of the face of the person whose, let's say, bone fracture they were analyzing. What happened in this study is that the statements that they wrote immediately became almost 3 times longer. And it became also 2-point-something times more accurate medically. Just the fact that this is her bone, this is his bone fracture. The power of human-to-human connection. And definitely I would also argue that the power of sense of meaning. I am writing something about her. So yes, we can do a lot about these things. And now let's move to the organizational level. That is where our studies have recently focused on, exactly trying to study something here, but also trying to change something here. And here I have listed from our studies and from others, kind of in a similar way, the transformative power of compassion concerning teams and organizations. First of all, evolution, we talked about a little spouse selection. I can send you some sources on that. A culture of trust and positivity. They are increased, they are fostered by compassionate culture in workplaces. Not really surprising, but just, it's good to see that that's the way it is. Jane Dutton, for instance, and Lilius and others talk about high-quality connections. It's a very useful concept what comes to, for instance, workplaces. Innovations, and this is exciting. There's a recent, actually ongoing study in California where they study Google as a work community. They want to find out in this project, Aristotle, which are the teams that are most productive, particularly in the sense of innovations. What separates these most innovative teams from the other teams? And the central concept in the findings is psychological safety. Psychological safety is about the feeling that I have at the moment with you, the feeling that if I make a little mistake, if I say something a little crazy, I know that nobody here will be rolling their eyes and just criticizing me very openly. You might, and you are free to do that, but I just sense that we have good spirit here in this room. But in the workplaces, do our team meetings, are they really places for criticism? Sometimes universities in particular tend to be that the ultimate god in our seminars is the god of criticism. That's like the beauty, and everything is built on that. And that is, of course, needed. We need to learn. But even the criticism is best taken in if it's encountered and if it's accompanied by some definite sense of authentic, positive feedback. So innovations, psychological safety is needed for innovations. It has also been studied in hospitals. Amy Edmondson launched or coined the concept. Customer and member interaction. Customer interaction when we look at the literature from business field, but also member interaction when I look at, for instance, the Finnish statistics concerning our national church. We have a church, we kind of call it national church. Almost 80% still are members, but we Finns are very, very passive as members. But when we look at the statistics, when we ask people why do they remain members, there's one core reason, and that is the social work. Our congregations are very active in social welfare actions and in acts of compassion. That's why people want to pay, and they pay hundreds of euros as church taxes if they want to remain members. And also, people use phrases like walking the talk. That's the social work, it's walking the talk of the spiritual teachings. Also, there are interesting studies concerning the customer interaction when patients are asked to rate how many minutes did your doctor give time to you. And if the doctor is considered, and if he or she was felt compassionate, people totally make mistakes in estimating the time. If it actually was 7 minutes that you got from your doctor, you would feel that 18.5. So this means that if we are compassionate, if we encounter our students in a compassionate manner, we are able to multiply our time. People feel that they were encountered. And that is definitely something that we need more, I believe also in university setting. Recruitment and commitment. American studies illustrate that people stay 3 times longer in the same workplace if they have the feeling and if they have the sense of meaning in the workplaces. They tend to be more committed emotionally and factually. And also, particularly looking at the younger generation, the millennials, there are Nordic statistics very strongly illustrating that young people, if we want the brightest minds for a certain company, or if we want the brightest minds to our university, the youngsters want to work in a place where there is certain ethical dimension to the organization. So it is an asset as well in recruitment. Well-being, that we already touched upon, and leadership. In Finland, at least, there tends to be this very traditional culture, particularly in business, that leaders think that if I am emotional, if I express my emotions, I will be looked as a weak director or a weak manager. And it's exactly the other way around. International studies illustrate that if a person, if a leader, if a manager is able to show some weaknesses as well, talk about his or her weaknesses, they are considered, and if they show compassion, self-compassion and compassion to others, they are considered more powerful managers. And also, not only more powerful, but also of higher level of expertise. And promoting compassion, then, we do have, of course, in different parts of the world, various training programs. It can be indeed increased, that has been proven. Most of the organizational context, or actually almost basically all that have been these interventions that have been conducted in organizational context, they are meditation-based. And what my group wanted to do, and what we did in this project called Co-Passion, was that we wanted to develop a non-meditation-based compassion training. It was 6 times 3 hours focusing on emotion skills, learning about emotions, the power of emotions, the view of humans being a compassionate creature, and cultivating these skills. And we focused also on managers, not training employees. And this is just to show you our study setting, the research design. We had these interventions, we have pre and post questionnaires posed at the study group. We had this control group in the same organization who did not get the training, and then followed up with some interviews 1.5 years later. And we did it in corporations, as I noted, also art museums, also, for instance, the largest private news channel in Finland. So big, powerful workplaces. And what did we find? Where could we see statistically significant differences? Well, self-rated compassion, yes, it was increased. Compassion skills and the fear of compassion was decreased. Follower-rated, this means that we trained the managers, but some of the items we actually tested from their people working in their team. These employees did not know what training had their manager got, but we wanted to see whether they still felt that something was different in their team and in their managers. And we were happy to find some statistically significant differences there, particularly related to servant leadership and autonomy support, meaning that they have the sense of being empowered and the sense of my manager empowering me and giving me room for autonomy. I will just show you little tidbits of these. So fear of compassion. Here we see the blue line is our intervention group, and the red line is the control group who did not get the training. And we measured this with various items. One of them is here. For instance, people will take advantage of me if they see me as too compassionate. Claims like this that people had to rate. So that was decreased. And then this servant leadership evaluated by the subordinates, the people working in the team. And here the items were, for instance, my manager helps me to further develop myself. My manager is open about his or her limitations and weaknesses. So this is definitely something that the business world is currently very interested in, but it is something that the religious organizations have been teaching all along. And here definitely, again, a power of our religious organizations to be able to teach the society and other organizations of the servant kind of a mindset. Autonomy support, last example. For instance, I feel that my supervisor provides me with choices and options. I feel understood. And I wanted to take you also a few quotations from our interview materials. For instance, there was a manager who told us that after the interviews, or in the interviews, that the responsibility I have has become clear and concrete to me. I have quite a responsibility of my own and others' well-being. It all starts from how I lead my own emotions. Or that how trust is created, not by forcing, but by sharing. Or that I feel I have a permission to care. It is a relief. Or now we talk about something that is at the very core of being a human. This could be the future of work. And it should and it will affect the strategic work as well. So the religious organizations have the core message already, and definitely something that the business world is starting to become more aware of. What we are still lacking, us in my team, others as well, is concrete tools to learn all of this in the everyday and also see long-term effect in organizations. It was much harder to detect differences 1.5 years later. And we are just about to submit a research proposal where we would like to study, and together with our wonderful colleagues here in Edinburgh, to study the power of compassion among physicians in hospitals, not in relation to patients this time, but among physicians, from one physician to another. So hopefully we'll get some funds to develop some tools and see some findings there. And now just a few words. I have referred to the religious organizations quite a few times, and this is also a claim that I'm often faced at. Religious individuals are more compassionate. True or false? Well, it's not true when we look at the closest circles. Helping family members, definitely all people, notwithstanding their religiosity, help just as much. This is what the statistics, at least, say. But it is definitely true when we look at the further circles, helping people outside of one close circles, helping people from who are further apart. It's difficult to study. In my findings, what is it in religion that seems to play a role? Usually two elements seem to arise in my quantitative and qualitative studies that I have conducted. First of all, being an active member of a religious community, and then the second is the sense and a feeling and an experience of personal relation to God. But there are various other ways of measuring religiosity, but these two seem to be the most powerful ones and most powerful predictors of compassion. But of course, theologically as well, we have experienced systematic theologians here, and it's not really black and white. Theologically, we are talking about a more complex manner, like wanting to go to heaven. Is that then, how does that relate to the motivations to help? But definitely, the human motivation is never black and white. We are never just altruistic or egoistic. It's always a mixture. I've also studied this compassion and interviewed citizens and also church members. How do they see? Like, what is at the end, what is most important? Is it the evangelizing or is it helping people? And it seems, at least in Finland, that religious organizations are actually quite divided in this. There are those people in organizations who say that it is the preaching that is the core of everything, and then the others saying that it all should start with and from the social work. And religions, of course, I want to leave you with the message and the reminder that they are really one of the most powerful agents of compassion in our societies. But of course, we can't close our eyes from the fact that they are also agents in debates and even animosity. And this definitely is the take-home message concerning religions, that they are never neutral in relation to compassion. This concerns individuals as well as then religious institutions. Here I just listed 5 elements. I have written on some of them and kind of the cycle that what is really the role of institutions in promoting individual compassion. It could also include negative elements, but I just want to focus now on the kind of positive promotion. The cultural values. For instance, in Finland, religious organizations have played a central role in building up our welfare system. So they have been there to build the structures of our society, religious institutions promoting the societal structures. They are venues, central venues for actions of compassion, maintaining the norms and teachings of compassion in our society, and then, of course, supporting individual religiosity. And I've also studied the other side of this coin. So this cycle shows what do the organizations do, how do they promote the individual religion and compassion link. But I have one quotation here. But perhaps we just read it, because I think it exemplifies beautifully the fact that most of my studies have been with the members of the Christian, the Church of Finland, but the passive members, kind of the typical Finns. And here I have a young lady who told me that I belong to the church, I have very much this certain way I believe, for example, in God. But I don't feel that there's anything special happening to me during the Sunday service. But of course, their values, I respect them and I try to follow them. I feel that the church is somehow like a guide to me. Guide. I think it's a strong choice of word. So even for passive members, definitely religious organizations playing a central role. And here, the other side of the coin, how do individuals, according to the Finnish studies, how do they experience the religion-compassion link? These 5 elements that I show here are not extremely surprising, but some of them are, I think, quite intriguing. How do people experience? What is it that supports their compassionate actions? What is it in religion, even though it would be passive religion? What is it that plays a role? What is interesting is the teachings of Bible. I have many interviewees whom I've been lucky and happy to encounter. They say that they have never really read the Bible, but then they are still able to quote several core teachings from Christianity that they feel that personally motivate their compassion. So these things are just much, much more complex than the statistics on religiosity may lead us to believe. Okay, just a few notions on the fact that the transformative power of compassion may not always be positive. It needs to be authentic. We are very tuned to the authenticity of compassion. And also, I just want to remind you that we have phenomena such as, for instance, compassion fatigue, that people who work a lot with and for compassion of others also need to take care of themselves. And then let's conclude with the societal level. I have slightly less on that, but basically we are talking about sustainability here. And in our society, we tend to see social sustainability and economic sustainability. We tend to see them as the opposites. And I think and I believe that should not really be the case. That the most fruitful, long-term, best business comes from being socially sustainable, being ethically valid. And then if we have fruitful and how would I say, the economic sustainability, if it exists, we are able to promote more strongly also the welfare of the people. And what is interesting here is that I believe that compassion actually not only kind of epitomizes and illustrates, but also promotes the synergy of these two. And that is what I believe is what we need in our societies. And it all feeds back. For instance, international studies illustrates that the higher the welfare system in the country, the higher the level of volunteering in the country. The higher the welfare system, the higher the norm of compassion, according to value studies. So if the public sector does a lot, it is not away from the people, but it's on the contrary, it maintains the value of compassion in our society. So to conclude, can compassion transform society? Definitely, my answer is yes, but we also need to take care of it. We need to spread the compassion. And here what helps us, I believe, is asking the question of what is the opposite of compassion. It is not violence, it is not animosity, it is not cruelty, but indifference. So everything, all of our deeds and actions that are even slightly below being indifferent, or somebody being indifferent to me, they are already compassion. And the kind of slogan that I want to leave you with would be then, small is all. It is exactly those tiny moments, the authentic moments in the everyday. Do we smile at our janitor when we walk into the premises of the university in the morning? How do we encounter a stranger on the street? That is not only crucial for the individuals, as I have shown you, but it's exactly what keeps the compassion in the society. It keeps it going and maintains these societal values. And this next one, my question might sound a bit kind of, how would I say, odd, but we need to ask this question from ourselves. What kind of energy steps into a room when I step into a room? Is it the kind of compassionate energy that we bring to the encounters? Or something else. Because we tend to have this illusion as human beings that we are extremely neutral. Nothing special happening here, no special emotions, but we are actually very seldom emotionally neutral. So our actions and also basically everything that we leave undone, they are much less neutral always. And I hope to encourage you to promote compassion and compassion in the everyday of yours. And just to remind you of the 4 kind of perspectives here is that we can try to be slightly more compassionate as givers of compassion. And also, not just to try to be more, but I also would like you to congratulate yourselves for the compassionate actions that you already do. And then, for instance, the A and B exercise that we had, the painful one in the beginning, it's already an act of compassion when we are able to listen to the other person for 1 minute, being present. But also, as a recipient, if we have a very hierarchical working community, it might be very difficult to receive compassion. It could be like, oh, scary, a sign of weakness. Are we able to receive compassion? That's also a very Christian spirit in it. As a bystander, what do I do if I see somebody being compassionate to somebody? Do I do something? Should I do something? And then self-compassion, the neighboring phenomenon here, also very important. All the studies illustrate that compassion is very contagious. It comes down to the mirror cells in our brain and all of that. It is contagious. So the levels of individuals, organizations, society, the cycle will keep on going. So the home assignment that I want to conclude with would be exactly the spreading of compassion. So take the uncomfortable moment tomorrow to pay a compliment to a stranger on a street, or a slightly bigger smile to your bus driver, or whatever it may be. Observe, like a researcher, what does it do to me? How does it feel in my body? Observe the other person. We Finns are extremely private persons. We never do small talk, not even about the weather, never. And I have used this exercise also in Finland. It might be painful, it might be uncomfortable, but do it. It will make you feel better, it will boost your health, it will make you more clever, we have learned, and the other person too. So thank you so very much, and I wish you the most compassionate and co-passionate autumn, and thank you. Thank you.